AMI has shown Citroen return to its slightly crazy best, and in fact it's a car we really enjoyed driving when we did a full review of it for Motors.co.uk, and if you haven't checked that out then please do. But Citroen isn't stopping there, and in fact is carrying on with its somewhat crazy crusade with this, the Citroen Oli concept. Now, as I mentioned, it is just a concept for now, which means that it's not going to appear on the public roads, but it's packed with loads of cool features which could trickle down into production vehicles of the future. Now, we've been given the opportunity to check out what it's like inside, what it's like to drive, and check out some of the amazing features that make it quite so unique. So before anything else, let's go and find out just what the Oli has to offer. As you might expect with a car that looks as amazing as the Oli does, it's jam-packed with really cool features. But let's start with the fundamental one. How do you charge this electric car? Because after all, it is electric. Well, that's solved by this port at the front, which comes out of this old school Citroen badge, which looks a bit like the one on the early 2CVs. Folding it away, you do need to give it a bit of a press, but we've got to give some leeway to this car because it is, after all, a prototype. Now, up top, these black sections are actually made out of this really cool material, which is made from cardboard and then given this reinforcing paint on top, which makes it super strong, but also very light. And in fact, that means you can stand on there and you can stand on the top section too, because it's all made of the same material. Now, as we move alongside, we've got these big doors with loads of glass, and there's a secondary door here, which is rear hinged, so it can create this seamless kind of effect down the side. As we move to the tyres, this is something I find really interesting. These are eco-friendly recyclable tyres, so they can actually be used twice. They can be run down and then re-grooved and recycled. And they sit around wheels which have a steel section in the middle for strength, but around the outer parts, that's all plastic too, again, in order to save weight. And then as we move around to the back of the Oli, we've got one of its key features, which is this pickup style bed. And it's actually something you might not expect to see on this car, but you lower this rear section like a traditional pickup. And then when you've got the rear seats folded down and the glass section folded away, that means you've got a full follow-through area. You can put surfboards or snowboards or even bikes probably at a push. And that just goes to show the kind of lifestyle attitude that Citroen is taking with the Oli. It can go anywhere and it can do any kind of activity that it wants to do. The Oli measures in at 4.2 metres long and it's 1.65 metres high. The roof, the bonnet and the rear are all made of that cardboard material, which is 50% lighter than the equivalent steel. And as I mentioned, it's so strong that you can actually stand on it. Now you might notice that the Oli actually has a perfectly vertical windscreen, and that's because that requires less glass than a traditional one. Again, it makes it lighter, but what Citroen has done to make sure that there's not too much wind impacting that is created these air ducts which move air up through here, and then it comes up out of this section and creates an alternative windscreen in air. So you can see it diverts it up and over, so not everything is blowing straight into that upright windscreen. It's a really clever innovation, and again, it helps to bring weight down, but means that it can still be driven at higher speeds. And when it comes to those doors, they're 20% lighter than those you'd find in a typical hatchback, and that's because they don't really have any wiring in them. They don't have any speakers, and they don't have any loom work whatsoever. Well, where do we start with the Oli's interior? I mean, obviously it's dominated by this bright orange colour, but what are the individual aspects to have a look at? Well, up here we've got this kind of flexible, almost like golf tee shaped material, which is good for storing loose items and stops them from flying about. And then in the middle, this glowing section is actually the car's smartphone. And when you put it in there, you can keep it charged up. Now, when it comes to the seats, Citroen has tried to put as much of its comfort-focused technology into them as it would do with its current range of passenger vehicles. So that's why they're really heavily cushioned, and actually they're very comfortable despite having basically nothing to them. And then at the side, something I really like is the fact that this car doesn't have any inbuilt speaker system. Instead, what it does is has UE speakers that come out. So when you've finished listening to your tunes in the car, you can just take them with you or pop them in your bag. It's an amazing interior, and also we've got this large sweeper style screen ahead of you which just has your key information. It doesn't have any real kind of guidance or navigation because that's all powered from your phone. I think it's a great showcase of what we can expect from Citroen in the future, and even if it's half as crazy as this, I think it will be a very exciting place to be. Now, I showed you earlier that the Oli can be converted into a type of pickup with a more load-focused rear-end design, but you can also put the middle section back up in which case you get 2 dedicated seats in the back. Now the seating position is actually really strange. It's more like a sports car because my bottom is really low and my knees are quite high. Now there's not a lot of space for my feet, but actually these seats are quite comfortable. They've got these very oddly designed squidgy headrests which do look quite strange, but they feel quite comfortable. Then ahead of me, I've got a nice little section for a tablet to be held there, and I've also got a small charger and a little bubble for my headphones, which I guess you could use to stop yourself from forgetting them or dropping them through the car. In the middle here, this is like a polystyrene type material. Again, we're talking about saving weight, but there are actually 2 cup holders and 2 little USB-C chargers, so there are some practical elements to the Oli's design too. Overall, I love the orange theme, and I wish more cars had bright orange interiors because I think it just makes everything far more exciting. Now, driving the Oli. Now you've got to bear with me on this one because we are inside the Farnborough Exhibition Centre, and in the middle of the Farnborough Exhibition Centre are lots of these metal grates. So if you hear a large banging every couple of seconds, it's not the car. It is these grates that I'm driving with, but I'll try my best to avoid them. And as you can see, it's also extremely dark inside here. There aren't any real lights inside the Oli. But despite its concept-y car looks and all of its design, it does have some real-world fundamentals. We've got a 40 kilowatt-hour battery, which Citroen says could deliver up to 248 miles of range. And thanks to rapid charging, you could do a 20 to 80% charge in around 23 minutes. So it's pretty speedy in the charging department. Now, I have been told that we're only really meant to do about 5 miles an hour, but I feel like you've got to gas it a bit if you're here. So, no, not massively fast, but we've got quite a noisy power steering setup. And the power steering actually has to be activated via a switch under the bonnet, which, let's be honest, isn't going to be ideal if you're driving this all the time. But when the power steering is activated, it's quite nice and light. These are big wheels that this car's trying to drive around, so you can kind of feel it turning quite strangely underneath you. But because it's so square, it feels very, very easy to get used to, as an alien concept, I suppose you could call it. And because there's loads of glass around the sides, I feel like you've got a really nice view of the area around you. Now, these obviously aren't the most scenic of environments to be driving in, but I think if you could be driving this in the south of France or in the south of Spain perhaps, I reckon this would be very pleasant indeed. And building on from the Ami, which feels, well, driving the Ami feels like you're very exposed to the elements. In here, you're very pleasantly cocooned. And I do quite like the brightness of this orange cabin, which helps lift the whole feel of it. Of course, at the rather sedate speeds that I'm travelling at now, I can't exactly test out whether that aerodynamic vent at the front is actually channeling any air over the windscreen. I'm not going nearly fast enough to make that work. But I can say that if I was given the opportunity to drive this on the public road, I wouldn't feel too worried. The Ami that's an area where the Ami actually struggles, is because it's so slow in its limited speed that you really wouldn't want to get onto a dual carriageway or any kind of major road. Whereas this, if it's got a decent amount of power, well, I think it'd be okay. I mean, it would probably stop quite a lot of traffic because, let's be honest, you're not going to see anything like this ever. But this is a very odd prospect because it's a concept which does actually work, and I've had a look at lots of concepts over the years and they very rarely work if they move at all. It's usually got a small leisure battery under the bonnet which makes it move back and forward at about a mile an hour. This one actually works and steers, so that's a very pleasant surprise just from the start. I think this thing's really cool. Let us know what you think of it in the comment section below, but I wish Citroen would make this. This is amazing to be around, and I think if you could take it down the beach and get some surfboards mounted on the back, yeah, I'd be well into that. But I don't know what you were. Let me know what you think. One thing that is quite interesting with the Oli as well is it has vehicle to load technology. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means that you can actually use the car's battery and the car's energy to power domestic appliances. It means in theory you could plug in your kettle, you could plug in your toaster if you really wanted to, or any kind of electrical appliance that has a 3-pin plug. But most excitingly, and this is where I feel the future of electric cars lies, is that you'd be able to use it as a storage device for home energy. So what you could technically do is store energy in the car when it's at a low price. So when there's less demand overnight, and you take it from your home and you put it straight into the car and you use this as effectively a large battery. And then say you come home and it's 5 o'clock and you want to put the washing machine on and the dishwasher and the tumble dryer and all the other electrical appliances that use plenty of energy, but you're using it at a high peak time when energy is at its most expensive, then what you could do is actually run your house off the car. So you're using that cheap energy from earlier to run your appliances at a peak time. And I think that vehicle to load technology is going to be very interesting indeed over the next couple of years. And I think at the moment, with energy prices as they are, if you'd be able to charge up your vehicle with really cheap energy and then offset it back into your house, I find that pretty impressive. I'd find that quite an attractive idea. Now, obviously, a car like the Citroen Oli isn't destined for the public roads, but what's it for? Why is it interesting? Well, I think what it is a great showcase of what we might be able to expect from Citroen cars of the future. Now, what it also means is that the brand itself is thinking outside of the box and playing with ideas and playing with materials, and through that comes some really interesting production cars. Now, we've seen recently with cars like the C5X that we reviewed in full for Motors.co.uk that Citroen knows now how to build cars that are comfortable but also have a real amount of character too. And this car, well, this leans far more on the character side of things than any production vehicle that it makes at the moment. But what we could do is see cars like this trickling through and ending up in dealerships up and down the country. I think that's something to be celebrated, really. Thank you for watching this first look at the Citroen Oli concept. Now, what do you think of this car? Would you use it every day? Would you drive it to the beach? Would you take it to the park? Or would you use it like a pickup truck? Let us know in the comments section below. And since you're here, please remember to subscribe to the Motors.co.uk YouTube channel and hit the bell icon so you're notified every time we upload a new review.